Like Plastic, Episode 1, Chapter 1, Young, Happy, and Japanese, Megumi and Junko are happy. You know how sometimes you see two young, attractive, and fashionable Japanese women and they seem deliriously happy? That's Megumi and Junko, and they're happy because they're in London for the first time ever, and it's everything they expected. They travel on an open top bus, they visit the Tower of London, they giggle as they pose next to guards in bearskin hats. They walk through the parks and stare at Buckingham Palace and are afraid of the pigeons in Trafalgar Square. They do all this and more, and it's only their first whole day in London, captured in every detail on 172 digital photographs. It's a carefree and chaotic day, kaleidoscopic, one that has a jangly and infectious pop soundtrack. If they went back and had dinner at their hotel and turned in early, the soundtrack would give way to a tune that was blissful and euphoric, and this would remain a perfect day. But Megumi and Junko are too young to sleep, and they've heard of a club that's trendy and exciting and full of celebrities, a club called Concrete. Their itinerary has been planned for months, cross-referenced with maps and guidebooks, and on this, their first evening, there's only one place that will do. You can already hear it, can't you? As much as you don't want to hear it, as much as you want this to remain a happy story, you can't escape the heavy, discordant note that's sounding behind Megumi and Junko's light-hearted soundtrack. Boom, boom, boom. That's the music of Concrete, dense and ominous, calling to them, and you know in the clench of your stomach that this day will end badly. Chapter 2, Rohypnol, Mon Amour, Concrete. None of these people look happy. They're too cool and too self-administered for smiles. There are no drag queens or fashion victims here either, just the achingly hip 20 to 40 uber-rich. There's laughter, but no matter where you look, you can't actually see anyone laughing, just blankly maintained faces, utterly empty expressions. There's energetic and upbeat music playing, but as you move through the club, as you pass the bar and tables and booths, even as you reach the dance floor, the mood is cold and restrained enough to be vaguely threatening. Only two people seem oblivious to the sinister undercurrents of Concrete out there on the dance floor, on a natural high that some of their fellow dancers have already noticed with a mix of resentment and envy. Megumi, Junko. Megumi leans in and calls something into Junko's ear. She nods, and they leave the dance floor and find a table. No sooner have they sat down than a waiter approaches with a tray bearing two suspiciously cheerful cocktails, courtesy of the management ladies. It's clear they don't understand. They're viewing London from within the comfort of a happy Japanese bubble, a bubble which is popped constantly by the strangeness of everything around them. Free drinks from club. Ah, now they understand. Thank you, they say with pleasant surprise, and offer little bows of the head as the waiter leaves. This is a great club, says Megumi, but Junko eyes the cocktail cautiously as she says, why did they give us free drinks? Maybe it's a trap. Maybe the first drink is always free, suggests Megumi. Who knows? Anything is possible here. Anything at all. Junko nods thoughtfully. They taste their drinks and find them cool and refreshing, and as they drink, they notice lots of other people drinking cocktails and strange bottled beer and champagne, and they feel like they fit in, like they belong here. They chat and watch people and think about getting another drink. Only the first was so strong, and eventually Junko says, let's dance again. There are Megumi and Junko, getting up from their table and heading to the dance floor. The music is faint and muffled now, because Megumi and Junko are on a security monitor in a back room of Concrete, being watched intently by the young owner of the club, Alexi Shakirov. As he watches, there's a knock on the door and someone comes in. It's the waiter, but Alexei keeps his eyes on the monitor, even after the waiter clears his throat and starts to talk. Excuse me, Alexi. Mr. Shakirov. They've had the drinks. Alexi still doesn't turn and takes so long to answer that the waiter becomes uncomfortable, not sure how much longer he should stand there. Finally, though, in a languidly privileged English accent, Alexi says, "So you know what to do." "Of course," says the waiter, who looks massively relieved to be escaping his boss's company. Alexi doesn't even notice the waiter leaving. He's mesmerized as Junko helps Megumi back to their table from the dance floor. Megumi looks unwell, but her friend doesn't look so good either. That was quick, maybe only 20 minutes. The waiter appears by their table, looking concerned, and takes them under his wing, escorting them away. Alexei sees nothing else. He doesn't see the knowing stares of the other guests, who all think they know exactly how these girls have overdone it, and how that happiness could never have been sustainable. He doesn't see the member of staff whisk away the empty cocktail glasses. He doesn't see any of it because his mind has followed Megumi and Junko right off the edge of the monitor. Rohypnol mon amour. Chapter 3. Alexei in Love. Alexei walks into the dimly lit, expensively upholstered hush of one of Concrete's private lounges. He closes the door of the windowless room behind him and smiles. He's bordering handsome, and if his face is a little too wide and his eyes are a little too sunken, his nose a little unformed, he's young and rich enough for these shortcomings to be easily overlooked. At first glance, many women might consider Alexei Shakirov highly eligible, and those women would be badly mistaken. Somewhere along the line, Alexei has misplaced some vital ingredients. His smile never gets any further than his mouth, and if he ever had any charm, it's buried deep in the permafrost that lies behind his eyes. He's looking at the two Japanese girls, slumped unconscious in large leather armchairs, their legs splayed out in front of them. He already knows their names. Junko is the one in the schoolgirl chic, a tartan miniskirt, white socks above the knee. Megumi is the hippie chick in orange suede jeans which cling to her thighs before flaring out at the bottom. Alexi walks over and playfully lifts the front of Junko's skirt, revealing her white underwear, the sight of which gives him a brief, anticipatory shudder. He pulls her a little further off the chair and then pulls her panties down over her legs. He lifts the skirt again, but the remnants of his smile have gone. He looks at the neat smoothness of her genitals, and whilst he's impressed at a technical level by the standard of depilation, he's bitterly disappointed. "That isn't fair," says a petulant Alexei, as if they are all playing a game together. Then he turns his attention to Megumi, her eyes open but glazed and locked out. Impatient now, he hurriedly unbuttons and unzips Megumi and pulls down her jeans and underwear in one swift movement, on the verge of a panic attack, fearful of being denied his prize. But he looks down and is massively relieved, so relieved that it takes a second or two for his desire to catch up with developments. What he sees below him is exactly what he expects of a Japanese girl, a lush thicket of black hair, spontaneous and tousled and wild. He laughs to himself, full of nervous energy, and reaches inside his jacket pocket. The light catches on the metal of the surgical-looking instrument in his hand, a hand which is visibly trembling. At this precise moment, in the strange rules that govern his universe, Alexei is in love. Chapter 4. Roku and Yuko, the Beauty of Neon. This is the fabulous Tokyo apartment of Roku and Yuko Sasaki, large and minimalist in its furnishings, with dazzling views over the sprawling galaxy that is this city at night. Roku is reclining in a chair, reading a comic book from his favorite series. Roku is 30, looks younger, is effortlessly stylish, with the kind of lean physique that suggests he can handle himself, though he probably never needs to, because he's pleasant of temperament, and his wealth is the kind that doesn't bring enemies with it. Yuko is mixing them both a martini of crystalline purity. She's 29, looks even younger, is beautiful and glamorous, not just in her clothes, but in her skin, in her nerve endings, in every movement and thought. This is not shallow glamour. This is a woman who likes to slop around in pajamas at weekends and still manages to look like she fell out of the pages of Vogue. Grace Kelly, Audrey Hepburn, Yuko Sasaki. Get the picture? She finishes mixing the drinks, brings them over and hands one to Roku, who thanks her by kissing her hand. Yuko then floats down onto one of the sofas, sips at her drink, and looks idly at a magazine on the coffee table, undecided as to whether she should pick it up. Her thoughts are interrupted by the ring of the telephone. She leans over, takes it from the coffee table, and answers. She listens to a babbling voice that's audible enough for Roku to put down his comic book and look on. Yuko appears increasingly confused and alarmed. Megumi, is that you? Wait there, Megumi, I'll get Roku. Roku has already put his drink down and is walking over to collect the phone as Yuko says, Your cousin, Megumi. She sounds very upset. Roku takes the phone and walks back to his chair as he says, Hello, Megumi? Are you in London? The response is so hysterical that he momentarily has to remove the phone from his ear. Megumi, please be calm. Tell me what happened. Something happened last night. Roku listens intently but keeps throwing confused glances at Yuko, who, in turn, looks questioningly at him, increasingly impatient to know what's going on. Roku is slowly beginning to understand, and in a concerned but measured tone, he says now, I see, and did he attack you? He listens again, and his response this time is insistent. But did he hurt you? The immediate reply is reassuring, and he shakes his head for Yuko's benefit. Finally, though, he is once again left confused. So, if he didn't attack you or hurt you, what exactly did he do? You must tell me. Meanwhile, Alexei is in the bedroom of his apartment. With delicate fingers, he has nimbly tied some fine thread around the lock of pubic hair, and is now hanging it from a small hook on a large display board. A neat little name tag above the hook says Megumi. He steps backwards and sits on the edge of the bed. There are at least 50 locks of hair hanging on the large display case built into the wall at the end of his bed, of many varied colors and textures, each with its own name tag like a fetishist's exotic butterfly collection. Alexi's chest heaves with the erotic charge of all that beauty laid out before him. Spent as he is, he's clearly becoming aroused yet again. He did what? Yuko is staring at Roku in utter disbelief. Roku himself can't believe the explanation he's just given. I know, it's very strange. What will you do? Roku thinks for a moment, at a loss for an obvious solution, then sees his comic book and says decisively, I'll do what Brett Plastic would do. I'll get it back and restore Megumi's honor. Of course, says Yuko, because getting it back and restoring Megumi's honor is the very least she would have expected. But how? Yuko is concerned that Roku thinks he can do it just like Brett Plastic, because she fears this might not be the occasion for employing the tactics of the famously super nice superhero who wins the day by being reasonable and kind. Unfortunately, Roku is thinking exactly that, and at the moment, he isn't even thinking of the more nuanced and conditional niceness of the later editions in the series. Perhaps it's all been a misunderstanding, he says hopefully. He responds to Yuko's consternation with an acknowledging shrug. How could someone steal a lock of pubic hair by mistake? Even so, he's determined to follow the example of Plastic. So, I'll find out who this man is and send him an email. If that doesn't work, we'll go to London. What a wonderful idea, says Yuko. It's been over a year since they were in London, and the thought of an adventure as well as shopping is irresistible. Will it be dangerous? London? Of course not. Oh, says Yuko, disappointed. Trying to cheer her up, he says, Well, it might be a little dangerous. She looks excited again, and he cautions, But I'm sending him an email first. Of course, says Yuko, confident that they'll be going to London. People who steal pubic hair don't answer emails. Chapter 5, Cleaning in Progress. Adjoining concrete is the London headquarters of the Shakirov Empire. In the plush but hostile marble surrounds of corporate toilets on the 4th floor, Sergei and Mickey, two of Alexei's thugs, are working a third man over in serious fashion. The man on the receiving end of the beating is the waiter we last saw in the club. Sergei and Mickey are large and powerful, but lodged inescapably in middle age. They're undoubtedly tough and dangerous men, but they're not in the best shape, and their hearts are no longer in it the way they might once have been. They land their punches on the waiter's body in a resigned, workmanlike fashion. Their eyes are heavily hooded, and when the door opens and they turn, it looks as though they've been roused from a deep sleep. The look is amplified further when they see that the person coming into the room is Alexei. Now they look as if they've been snapped out of an unpleasant dream in which everything was still better than this. Their distracted pause has allowed the waiter to slump to the floor, but they pull him back to his feet and lean him against the wall. He's already so badly beaten that Sergei has to hold him in place. Alexei walks across to them, smiling, and says to the waiter, "Oh dear, you're not looking so good." "I'm okay," says the waiter defiantly, mustering all the feelings of contempt and resentment he's been storing up for 2 years now. Alexei nods and talks like he's learned how to be a hard man by watching films. "Then these men will have to work some more, because I don't want you to feel okay. I want you to feel bad. That way, the next time you feel like talking to the Sunday Times about how much money my father has, you'll think again. No." Alexei gives another nod to Sergei and Mickey, a condescending nod that silently infuriates both of them. But as he walks away, the waiter says quite clearly, "Pervert." This is not a good idea, and the waiter must surely know it. Sergei throws him a look as if trying to advise him to shut up. Still defiant, though, the waiter says, "I don't care. Beat me up some more. He's still a pervert." 3 deafening gunshots ring out, bouncing like an explosion around the marble walls, an ear cracking so unexpected that it takes Sergei and Mickey a second or two to realize they're covered in the waiter's blood, and that his face has disappeared into a visceral mash. Slowly, with a lumbering acceptance of the changed circumstances, Sergei takes his arm away and lets the waiter fall to the floor. They both turn to stare at Alexei, who's still pointing the gun at the spot where the waiter was recently standing. He lets the arm with the gun drop to his side. "Sorry about the mess," he says casually, and leaves, picking up a yellow "cleaning in progress" sign from behind the door and placing it outside the toilets. Sergei and Mickey look at each other and they don't need to speak. This is so not like the old days in every conceivable way. As Alexei walks in good humor back toward his office, a young male employee approaches him with a sheet of paper. "Mr. Shakirov, I think you should read this." "What? Tell me," says Alexei impatiently, like a man disturbed in the midst of some reverie. "A fax that just came through." Tell me. Tell me." "You mean read it to you?" Alexei responds with a look of incredulity, and the employee says, "Of course. Sorry." The employee holds up the fax to read it, his hand trembling violently. Even though he's no younger and no less physically imposing than Alexei, he's clearly terrified in his presence. "Dear sirs, as you have not responded to my email, I have no choice but to come and collect the item in person. I hope this does not inconvenience you in any way." Alexei smiles, which the employee recognizes as a truly dangerous moment. "You know, I don't have time for riddles. What is this?" "The email said you had something belonging to his cousin and politely requested its return. It's from Japan, from someone called Roku Sasaki." Whatever humor Alexei had brought into this exchange has now evaporated. He snaps impatiently, "It's spam, moron! We don't deal with Japan. This is just like these African scams. Spam, scam, thank you, ma'am, and good night, Japan." Alexei stares off into the middle distance. For a moment he looks as if he's searching for something else to say, but he's lost, his mind already elsewhere, and drifts off along the corridor in order that his body might join it. The employee looks at the fax again and shrugs, but just as he's about to walk back into his office, the piece of paper is taken out of his hand by Boris. Boris Bulgakov is a sharply dressed but bulky and sad-eyed Russian in his 50s. Boris is the loyal lieutenant of Vladimir Shakirov, Alexei's father, who still owns the empire over which he allows his son to exercise a certain amount of control. Like all of Vladimir's associates, Boris has become very rich since the end of communism, but you can see that, like Sergei and Miki, he still hankers after the old days of the Soviet black market. This is a man that time has left behind, albeit with a lot of money to keep him company. When he talks, it's with a mournful Russian accent. What is this? It's nothing. Spam, says the employee, a little deflated and embarrassed. Boris reads the facts and says, You have the email? Yes, I still have it. Forward email to me, if you please. Yes, of course, Mr. Bulgakov. Thank goodness, thinks the employee. Someone here takes him seriously. Boris walks away, still poring over the facts in his hand. He passes the toilets and double takes at the cleaning in progress sign. He opens the door and sees Sergei and Mickey mopping the walls and floor. A large cleaning trolley is off to one side, with two legs sticking out of the top of it. Sergei and Mickey stop what they're doing and nod in acknowledgement to Boris, as if asking if this is what it's come to, where their glory days have brought them. Boris sighs heavily and allows the door to close. Roku and Yuko are in the first-class cabin of an airplane, bound for London. Yuko is sleeping, but Roku is reading a Brett Plastic comic book. He loves the Brett Plastic series. They're exciting, but they always leave him with a feeling of peace and contentment. They make him appreciate that the world is a good place. This is Brett Plastic issue number 1.